Life has started on this planet since 14 billion years ago. People come in this world and leave. Among them, some people have made their name heard across the world. But does they always had a successful life? Do they always wanted to become what they were? What were their struggles? How did they live? Do they got a peaceful end? To know about all this, let's take a walk with us to the facts unforeseen.
Hello guys. Welcome back to Hot News Studio and welcome back to Facts Unforeseen. We will continue from our previous episode, The Life Journey of Dr. Albert Einstein. If you haven't watched the previous episode, click on the I button. So without wasting any time, let's start the video. 1908 to 1933, early academic career. Einstein's sabbatical as a civil servant approached its end in 1908, when he secured a junior teaching position at the University of Bern. In 1909, a lecture on relativistic electrodynamics that he gave at the University of Zurich, much admired by Alfred Kleiner, led to Zurich's luring him away from Bern with a newly created associate professorship. Promotion to a full professorship followed in April 1911, when he accepted a chair at the German Charles Ferdinand University in Prague, a move which required him to become an Austrian citizen of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. His time in Prague saw him producing 11 research papers. In July 1912, he returned to his alma mater, the ETH Zurich, to take up a chair in theoretical physics. His teaching activities there centered on thermodynamics and analytical mechanics, and his research interests included the molecular theory of heat, continuum mechanics and the development of a relativistic theory of gravitation. In his work on the latter topic, he was assisted by his friend, Marcel Grossmann, whose knowledge of the kind of mathematics required was greater than his own. In the spring of 1913, two German visitors, Max Planck and Walther Nernst, called upon Einstein in Zurich in the hope of persuading him to relocate to Berlin. They offered him membership of the Prussian Academy of Sciences, the directorship of the planned Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Physics and a chair at the Humboldt University of Berlin that would allow him to pursue his research supported by a professorial salary but with no teaching duties to burden him. Their invitation was all the more appealing to him because Berlin happened to be the home of his latest girlfriend, Elsa Lowenthal. He duly joined the academy on July 24, 1913, and moved into an apartment in the Berlin district of Dahlem on April 1, 1914. He was installed in his Humboldt University position shortly thereafter. The outbreak of the First World War in July 1914 marked the beginning of Einstein's gradual estrangement from the nation of his birth. When the Manifesto of the 93 was published in October 1914, a document signed by a host of prominent German thinkers that justified Germany's belligerence, Einstein was one of the few German intellectuals to distance himself from it and sign the alternative, ironic manifesto to the Europeans instead. But this expression of his doubts about German policy did not prevent him from being elected to a 2-year term as president of the German Physical Society in 1916. And when the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Physics opened its doors the following year, its foundation delayed because of the war, Einstein was appointed its first director, just as Planck and Nernst had promised. Einstein was elected a foreign member of the Royal Netherlands Academy of Arts and Sciences in 1920, and a foreign member of the Royal Society in 1921. In 1922, he was awarded the 1921 Nobel Prize in Physics for his services to theoretical physics, and especially for his discovery of the law of the photoelectric effect. At this point, some physicists still regarded the general theory of relativity skeptically, and the Nobel citation displayed a degree of doubt even about the work on photoelectricity that it acknowledged. It did not assent to Einstein's notion of the particulate nature of light, which only won over the entire scientific community when S. N. Bose derived the Planck spectrum in 1924. That same year, Einstein was elected an international honorary member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Britain's closest equivalent of the Nobel Award, the Royal Society's Copley Medal, was not hung around Einstein's neck until 1925. He was elected an international member of the American Philosophical Society in 1930. Einstein resigned from the Prussian Academy in March 1933. His accomplishments in Berlin had included the completion of the general theory of relativity, proving the Einstein-de Haas effect, contributing to the quantum theory of radiation, and the development of Bose-Einstein statistics. 1919, putting general relativity to the test. In 1907, Einstein reached a milestone on his long journey from his special theory of relativity to a new idea of gravitation with the formulation of his equivalence principle, which asserts that an observer in an infinitesimally small box falling freely in a gravitational field would be unable to find any evidence that the field exists. In 1911, he used the principle to estimate the amount by which a ray of light from a distant star would be bent by the gravitational pull of the Sun as it passed close to the Sun's photosphere, that is, the Sun's apparent surface. He reworked his calculation in 1913, having now found a way to model gravitation with the Riemann curvature tensor of a non-Euclidean four-dimensional space-time. By the fall of 1915, his reimagining of the mathematics of gravitation in terms of Riemannian geometry was complete, and he applied his new theory not just to the behavior of the Sun as a gravitational lens but also to another astronomical phenomenon, the precession of the perihelion of Mercury, a slow drift in the point in Mercury's elliptical orbit at which it approaches the Sun most closely. A total eclipse of the Sun that took place on May 29, 1919 provided an opportunity to put his theory of gravitational lensing to the test, and observations performed by Sir Arthur Eddington yielded results that were consistent with his calculations. Eddington's work was reported at length in newspapers around the world. On November 7, 1919, for example, the leading British newspaper, The Times, printed a banner headline that read, "Revolution in Science, New Theory of the Universe, Newtonian Ideas Overthrown." 1921 to 1923, coming to terms with fame. With Eddington's eclipse observations widely reported not just in academic journals but by the popular press as well, Einstein became perhaps the world's first celebrity scientist, a genius who had shattered a paradigm that had been basic to physicists' understanding of the universe since the 17th century. Einstein began his new life as an intellectual icon in America, where he arrived on April 2, 1921. He was welcomed to New York City by Mayor John Francis Hylan, and then spent 3 weeks giving lectures and attending receptions. He spoke several times at Columbia University and Princeton, and in Washington, he visited the White House with representatives of the National Academy of Sciences. He returned to Europe via London, where he was the guest of the philosopher and statesman Viscount Haldane. He used his time in the British capital to meet several people prominent in British scientific, political or intellectual life, and to deliver a lecture at King's College. In July 1921, he published an essay, My First Impression of the USA, in which he sought to sketch the American character, much as had Alexis de Tocqueville in Democracy in America, 1835. He wrote of his transatlantic hosts in highly approving terms, "What strikes a visitor is the joyous, positive attitude to life. The American is friendly, self-confident, optimistic, and without envy." In 1922, Einstein's travels were to the Old World rather than the New. He devoted 6 months to a tour of Asia that saw him speaking in Japan, Singapore and Sri Lanka, then known as Ceylon. After his first public lecture in Tokyo, he met Emperor Yoshihito and his wife at the Imperial Palace, with thousands of spectators thronging the streets in the hope of catching a glimpse of him. In a letter to his sons, he wrote that Japanese people seemed to him to be generally modest, intelligent and considerate, and to have a true appreciation of art. But his picture of them in his diary was less flattering. Intellectual needs of this nation seemed to be weaker than their artistic ones. Natural disposition? His journal also contains views of China and India which were uncomplimentary. Of Chinese people, he wrote that even the children are spiritless and look obtuse. It would be a pity if these Chinese supplant all other races. For the likes of us the mere thought is unspeakably dreary, He was greeted with even greater enthusiasm on the last leg of his tour, in which he spent 12 days in mandatory Palestine, newly entrusted to British rule by the League of Nations in the aftermath of the First World War. Sir Herbert Samuel, the British High Commissioner, welcomed him with a degree of ceremony normally only accorded to a visiting head of state, including a cannon salute. One reception held in his honor was stormed by people determined to hear him speak. He told them that he was happy that Jews were beginning to be recognized as a force in the world. Einstein's decision to tour the Eastern Hemisphere in 1922 meant that he was unable to go to Stockholm in the December of that year to participate in the Nobel Prize ceremony. His place at the traditional Nobel banquet was taken by a German diplomat, who gave a speech praising him not only as a physicist but also as a campaigner for peace. A 2-week visit to Spain that he undertook in 1923 saw him collecting another award, a membership of the Spanish Academy of Sciences signified by a diploma handed to him by King Alfonso XIII. His Spanish trip also gave him a chance to meet a fellow Nobel laureate, the neuroanatomist Santiago Ramón y Cajal. 1922 to 1932, serving the League of Nations. From 1922 until 1932, with the exception of a few months in 1923 and 1924, Einstein was a member of the Geneva-based International Committee on Intellectual Cooperation of the League of Nations, a group set up by the League to encourage scientists, artists, scholars, teachers and other people engaged in the life of the mind to work more closely with their counterparts in other countries. He was appointed as a German delegate rather than as a representative of Switzerland because of the machinations of two Catholic activists, Oskar Halicki and Giuseppe Motta. By persuading Secretary-General Erich Drummond to deny Einstein the place on the committee reserved for a Swiss thinker, they created an opening for Gonzague de Reynaud, who used his League of Nations position as a platform from which to promote traditional Catholic doctrine. Einstein's former physics professor Hendrik Lorentz and the Polish chemist Marie Curie were also members of the committee. 1925, touring South America. In March and April 1925, Einstein and his wife visited South America, where they spent about a week in Brazil, a week in Uruguay and a month in Argentina. Their tour was suggested by Jorge Tuclau, 1856 to 1927, and Mauricio Nierenstein, 1877 to 1935, with the support of several Argentine scholars, including Julio Rey Pastor, Jacob Laub, and Leopoldo Lugones, and was financed primarily by the Council of the University of Buenos Aires and the Asociación Hebraica Argentina, Argentine Hebraic Association, with a smaller contribution from the Argentine Germanic Cultural Institution. 1930 to 1931, touring the U.S. In December 1930, Einstein began another significant sojourn in the United States, drawn back to the U.S. by the offer of a 2-month research fellowship at the California Institute of Technology. Caltech supported him in his wish that he should not be exposed to quite as much attention from the media as he had experienced when visiting the U.S. in 1921, and he therefore declined all the invitations to receive prizes or make speeches that his admirers poured down upon him. But he remained willing to allow his fans at least some of the time with him that they requested. After arriving in New York City, Einstein was taken to various places and events, including Chinatown, a lunch with the editors of the New York Times, and a performance of Carmen at the Metropolitan Opera, where he was cheered by the audience on his arrival. During the days following, he was given the keys to the city by Mayor Jimmy Walker and met Nicholas Murray Butler, the president of Columbia University, who described Einstein as the ruling monarch of the mind. Harry Emerson Fosdick, pastor at New York's Riverside Church, gave Einstein a tour of the church and showed him a full-size statue that the church made of Einstein, standing at the entrance. Also during his stay in New York, he joined a crowd of 15,000 people at Madison Square Garden during a Hanukkah celebration. Einstein next traveled to California, where he met Caltech president and Nobel laureate Robert A. Millikan. His friendship with Millikan was awkward, as Millikan had a penchant for patriotic militarism, where Einstein was a pronounced pacifist. During an address to Caltech students, Einstein noted that science was often inclined to do more harm than good. This aversion to war also led Einstein to befriend author Upton Sinclair and film star Charlie Chaplin, both noted for their pacifism. Carl Laemmle, head of Universal Studios, gave Einstein a tour of his studio and introduced him to Chaplin. They had an instant rapport, with Chaplin inviting Einstein and his wife, Elsa, to his home for dinner. Chaplin said Einstein's outward persona, calm and gentle, seemed to conceal a highly emotional temperament, from which came his extraordinary intellectual energy. Chaplin's film, City Lights, was to premiere a few days later in Hollywood, and Chaplin invited Einstein and Elsa to join him as his special guests. Walter Isaacson, Einstein's biographer, described this as one of the most memorable scenes in the new era of celebrity. Chaplin visited Einstein at his home on a later trip to Berlin and recalled his modest little flat and the piano at which he had begun writing his theory. Chaplin speculated that it was possibly used as kindling wood by the Nazis. Thanks for watching this video. To know more about Einstein life, B5, his scandals, his work on general relativity, lasers, unified field theory, his clash with Niels Bohr on quantum mechanics, spooky action, Hitler era, immigration to US, his involvement in Manhattan Project, his regrets and death, do not miss the next episode of Facts Unforeseen.